Good evening, everyone. Thank you for turning out tonight, the beginning of a 3-day weekend. Special thanks to all the kids in the audience, high school students, or maybe middle school students, who decided it was really okay to be seen in public with mom and or dad. My name is Evan Lurie. I'm the chair of GUN's Parent Ed Committee. If you would, please take a moment to introduce yourself to your neighbor, someone that you did not come with, and share how you know when you are a success. Very good. Thank you very, very much. It's important for our speaker to know that we've got a live audience and a lot of energy in the room. So for everyone to enjoy this evening, we all know when we smile, we are more inclined toward joy. So toward that end, here's a little humor, hopefully, for the evening. A few thoughts on success. Woody Allen claimed that my success has enabled me to strike out with a higher class of women. Jerry Seinfeld wants to know, if a book about failures doesn't sell, is it a success? David Steinberg observed, you get to a philosophy after a while that everything is sort of cycling. I have a sort of capsulized philosophy that your success is so relative. When you're a baby, success is not wetting the bed. When you're a teenager, success is going all the way. When you're a young man, success is making money. And when you're middle-aged, success is being happy. When you're an old man, success is going all the way. And when you're really old, it's not wetting your bed. A few general housekeeping announcements before we start tonight's program. If you know that your cell phone is muted, please raise your hand. Excellent. I saw almost no one without their hand up. So I don't need to take another moment to make sure that you know that your cell phone is muted. So first of all, I want to say a special welcome to the Pally families. This is being put on by the GUN Parent Ed PTSA, but we thought that this was a topic that certainly would have a broader appeal. So Pally families, thank you for joining us tonight. Events of this size require many hands. On behalf of the GUN Parent Ed team, thank you to GUN's PTSA President Sigrid Pinsky. We also benefit from the leadership and support of GUN's principal, Kathy Lawrence. This beautiful facility is ably staffed by Dean Bunderson and Kyle Langdon. Thank you, Kyle. For tonight's evening, Andrew Mello is capturing video, which will ultimately be posted online. Several volunteers stepped up tonight. Thank you especially to Kirsha Gandhi and Eileen Landy, who were with us the last time we did this. John Wu, Amy Lowe, and Piyush Shah, as well as Star Teachout. Our Mandarin translator tonight is Jenny Xiong. Thank you, Jenny. So, our speaker this evening is Jamie Kyra O'Keefe, PhD. Jamie is a researcher, educator, and meditator committed to cultivating the best in the human spirit. Her research focuses on student stress in high-achieving schools, where expectations to be the best can overshadow authentic human connection. Through innovative educational experiences, she helps students, parents, teachers, and school leaders reduce stress and cultivate wellness. O'Keefe holds a PhD in the Learning Sciences from the Stanford Graduate School of Education, a master's in education in mind, brain, and education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and a bachelor's in psychology from Middlebury. She has always had one foot in academic hubs like Harvard and Stanford, and the other foot in spiritual centers such as Esalen and the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies. Her work arose out of her own struggle to balance the head and the heart while in school. She understands stress from the inside out. First she lived it, then she studied it, finally she healed it. Now she helps others find a way out as well. Please help me warmly welcome Dr. Jamie O'Keefe.
Wow, thank you, Evan. Thank you so much to the Gunn Parent Education Committee for organizing this event and Palo Alto High School for the beautiful space. And thank you all so much for being here tonight on a Friday night. That just really shows how much you care. And well, here we are in Palo Alto, known as one of the best school districts in the world, down the street from Stanford University, known as one of the best universities in the world. And here I am on stage, an individual. This looks like a TED Talk. I mean, the words success and flourishing are in the title. And so you might be expecting to leave with my 8-step proven method for ensuring that your kid becomes super successful while also remaining stress-free, resilient, happy, and generally liked by everyone around. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not here tonight to help you or your child become more successful. I'm not here to help you or your child become better in any way. I'm not here to help you or your child become tougher or more resilient. In fact, I have come to Palo Alto tonight to do what some would say might be the impossible, which is to try to convince you that success itself is the problem. To invite you to consider the possibility that hidden within our most cherished American ideal, success is something that's not good for me, that's not good for you, and certainly not good for children. But success is a big word, and there's a lot hiding in it. And so our job tonight is to figure out the specific parts of that word that seem to be causing so much stress and anxiety. So tonight we'll be deconstructing success for the sake of love, for the sake of your relationship with yourself and your relationship with your child. Because there is a mystery afoot, and there's 2 parts. Part 1 goes like this: why are so many students, despite having it all, despite doing everything right, suffering so immensely? In the past few decades, we've seen a surge of media attention and books coming out about the incredible amounts of stress and mental health issues faced by students in high-achieving environments. And we've also heard from Julie Lithcott-Hames about parents' experience and anxiety and stress among parents who are helping their children succeed. Fear, anxiety, depression, isolation, a sense of meaninglessness, these are just a few of the experiences students commonly report as they make their way through their high school and college years. And the work that I've come to share with you tonight contributes to this conversation by going deeper into students' everyday experiences of anxiety at one of our country's top universities. I conducted a 2-year qualitative study there, and I essentially immersed myself in students' lives to try to understand their lives through their eyes as best I could. And so I hope that this work will give you points of connection with your child, points of compassion, and a deep understanding of their everyday experience. I conducted interviews, focus groups, collected personal essays from students, hung out with them, spent time with them, heard their stories, heard their jokes. And this was at one of the top universities in the country. And so here we have the winners of the American educational system. They did it. They got in. And unfortunately, getting in did not resolve their stress, as is often assumed, and as we will hear in the findings of my study. And tonight, our goal is to really go deep and understand what might be lying at the root of student stress and anxiety. Now, we've been trying to solve this problem. Many schools have created new programs in happiness, resilience, compassion, self-compassion, meant to release students from their stress. And this brings us to part 2 of the mystery. And that is that what's strange and devastating here, I've seen it in my research and you may be hearing it in your schools, is that students are saying things like, now happiness feels like one more thing I can fail at. In my study, I heard students saying things like, I know self-compassion is really important and I am terrible at self-compassion, or I'm really bad at growth mindset. So this brings us to part 2 of the mystery, which is that why do so many of our attempts to help seem to only offer temporary relief, or as some students insist, make matters worse? Our attempts to help can feel to students like one more goal they have to achieve, one more goal that they could potentially fail at. Our attempts to fix student stress can contribute to that stress. Our attempts to solve the problem can rebuild the very same problem. Now, sometimes a problem is hard to solve because it's too far away from us. It's located in a distant world, a world we just don't understand. But there's another kind of problem that's difficult to solve precisely because it's so close to us, we can't even see it. It's the water we're swimming in every day. It's in the books we read, it's in the TV shows we watch, it's in our goals, it's in what we strive for, it's in our fears. It's everywhere and nowhere at once, and so it seems like a natural given feature of the world, but it's not. It's a feature of the social world in which we reside, in the lens through which we're viewing the world. And so we cannot fix this problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. We can't fix a cultural problem with the tools of that culture. So tonight, I hope we can stop and step back, look at the tools in our hands, and ask ourselves, what are these tools, these practices of success? And what do they do to interpersonal relationships and our relationship with ourselves? In the conversation on student stress, I also want to point out that it can be easy to point the finger of blame at individuals and say, oh, it's the student's fault. They put too much pressure on themselves. No, it's the parents' fault. They put too much pressure on the students. No, it's the teacher's fault. It's the school leader's fault. But all of this finger pointing keeps us separated from each other and keeps us unaware of the broader culture where this is coming from. It can also be easy to make little tweaks to our schedules and to our schools and remain unaware of how our schedules and our schools arise from a deeper structure. I prefer the advice of one of my favorite poets, David Whyte, and we can hold this as an intention for tonight. Arrange to get really tired of yourself. Get fed up with what you're saying, who you're saying it to, how long you've been saying it. Develop an almost allergic reaction to the persona that you are constantly presenting to the world. And then, almost like a skin, it is allowed to wrinkle and desiccate and dry and fall away from you. So tonight, I invite us all to embrace this kind of molting process. The good news is that if you stay with me on this journey, not only tonight, but tomorrow and into our future, then I promise you we will emerge together into our shared humanity, into connection, into compassion for ourselves and each other, into a place where we can really make a choice for ourselves. And that is a really beautiful place. So tonight, I'll be taking us through first a discussion of the culture of success in America today, the broader system and some of the demands it puts on human beings. And then I'll share with you the findings from my research describing student stress at the university. And we will, of course, discuss supporting students. Now, before jumping into the culture of success, I need to name a few powerful human dynamics. Because the culture of success, it attempts to subordinate relationship to individual self-interest. But relationship is primary. And this is what it forgets. Relationship is the medium within which everything happens. Nothing happens outside of relationship, outside of social interaction for human beings. Even when I am by myself, lost in my own private world of thoughts, that world of thoughts, well, that's the voices, those are the voices of my community. And myself, the one that I have been told is separate from others, the one that I have been told is the result solely of my hard work as an individual. No, that was a collaborative process, and myself was shaped through social interaction. We are radically interconnected, and nothing about us is separate at all. And love is powerful. Our drive toward unity is powerful. We are social animals that desperately want to belong. Look at this little guy. He's so happy because he's wearing a black shirt just like Dad, hands on his hips just like Dad. This feeling is ecstasy for the child. When we feel like we belong, we're a part of our social group, that feels good. And this marks safety for the child, safety for the child's body. The child knows I have to stay safe within the group. Now, the flip side of that coin is that when we feel that we do not belong to our family, to our social group, we can feel all but intolerable pain. This pain is the negation of relationship. This is why harsh words from a loved one can feel so cutting. This is why children fear rejection from their parents, and why parents can even fear rejection from their child. Social exclusion activates shame in our bodies, which is one of the most uncomfortable sensations to feel. Now, these sensations, the ecstasy of belonging and the pain of social exclusion, are particularly visceral for children and for teens. And children learn how to manage these sensations, seeking love, avoiding shame, by learning how to behave appropriately, how to seem right, how to project an appropriate self according to the norms of their culture. And children pay very careful attention to what gets rewarded and what gets punished, not only by their parents, but from other adults in their life and from their peers. And in all of this process, all of which occurs through relationship, the child's sense of self gets formed. So let's take a look at the kind of self that gets encouraged to form through the American educational system. Now, schooling as an institution transmits the values of its culture. And every culture has its myths and its deities. And one deity of considerable importance here in America is the individual, the ego, the me. But more than that, we love the story of the total winner, the quintessential self-made person who can do it all with confidence and ease, realizing greater and greater achievements, like a line on a chart that can't help but go up. Stories of the total winner surround Silicon Valley, and stories of the total winner surround the college admissions process. And this is the culture of success. It's a set of popular beliefs about what it means to be a cherished member in American society today, what it means to be an extraordinarily successful person. So, as I imagine many folks in this room have been doing, if you look at any college admissions website or college guidebook or a popular media article about students at a top university, you'll see the behaviors and the traits that are cherished and condoned here in American society, traits that together comprise the right kind of person for this society. I actually spent about a year of my research collecting these different behaviors and traits that you can see listed in all the different books and websites, and sort of put them together into this archetype total winner figure, and it was quite a bit. I could probably hand the microphone over to any one of you and you could complete this list, but the narrative goes, one should have the appropriate capacities, one should be intelligent, naturally capable. One should display appropriate behaviors and traits. You should be productive, proactive, hardworking. There's even the appropriate motivations. One should be sincere. One should want to change the world. One should always want to improve oneself and be constantly getting better. Now, I may be stating things that seem so obvious to you. You wonder why I say them out loud. But that's exactly the point, is we're trying to drill down into some of the core assumptions in the culture of success, core assumptions around which we organize our lives and point them out and see how it can affect the mindset of a student. Now, in the college admissions process, the individuals who best display these traits will be chosen for membership. And this is the culture of success. This is how it speaks. Be great, be a winner, get chosen, receive membership and resources, and we assume live happily ever after. This is the narrative template, the script, we are told, for being a good, virtuous person in America today. And of course, there's a version of the total winner narrative for parents, too. I mean, you can just take a moment to think to yourself, parents, what is the total winner version for parents? What does it mean to be the best parent, in Palo Alto, to be a great parent? And this, I imagine, is contributing to some of the stress and the anxiety that you may be feeling as parents. And whether you identify as this character, as the total winner, or see it in others, it seems that everyone has to make sense of their lives, of themselves, in relation to this mythical hero figure of American success. So the college admissions process and the script, the narrative of the total winner, they set the stage for a certain relational logic of success. And there's 3 patterns I want to call out here, which will set us up for understanding the findings of my study. First, individuals compete to display the traits of the total winner. So this selection process, it puts the onus on individuals to stand out and demonstrate their rights to belong by being the right kind of person. If you are the right kind of person, if you become the total winner, if you are selected, you receive membership and the resources that go along with that membership, praise, all sorts of other goodies from society, and, as it is commonly assumed, a sense of belonging or happiness, or perhaps even release from your stress. Now, whatever stands in the light casts a shadow. And the shadow side of the culture of success and of this myth of the total winner is this notion that anyone who is not the total winner, anyone who does not embody that ideal, is seen as less than, because in American society, generally, failure is seen as shameful. At its most extreme, the shadow side of the culture of success responds to failure or any deviation from this mythical norm of the total winner with criticism or, in its most extreme form, contempt. So these are the 3 patterns I want to call out because they're going to help us make sense of what's to come. And many well-intentioned parents who only want the best for their child and who want to protect their child from failure help them become the total winner. And this is what a great deal of time and energy goes into in the American educational system. And the reasoning goes, if my child ends up on top, then my child will be okay. My child won't receive this kind of poor treatment given to others. And my research calls that strategy into question by documenting some of the unforeseen consequences for students who do indeed make it to the top. So let's turn now to the study. And so I spent 2 years spending time with undergraduates at one of the top universities in the country. And when students find out that they got into this school, they are elated. They did it. They were chosen. They got in. Finally, the reasoning goes, finally, I've made it to the finish line. I am done with the hoops. I can relax. I won't feel stress. Finally, I can be happy. When students arrive to campus, they're greeted by older students holding signs that might say, "Welcome to paradise." And campus is gorgeous. Everyone's buzzing around on bikes looking really happy. But now it doesn't take long for students to realize upon arrival as a freshman that they're simply deeper in the heart of success culture. And here there's a new set of expectations, a new set of demands. At the activities fair, the freshmen are encouraged to stock up on extracurriculars. At the internship fair, they're told to get an internship and not waste their summer. They see flyers on campus that say, making the grade, talking the talk, and even how to win at life. This says, succeed in your career, improve your relationships, and achieve your biggest goals. Whew. Before they just had to win admissions into a top school, but now they have to win at life. This consciousness of success is like a fractal that spreads across every instant of time, there can be a moment that is successful or a failure, and now a life. You have to win at life. So the students quickly try to figure out how to do this. And the worst part is they're surrounded by other winners. This is known as the frog pond effect in the education literature, where students who are used to being the best or used to being number one, when they all are selected and gathered into one of these top universities, they can experience a great deal of stress and anxiety as they negotiate who's who on campus. Now, the students at the university, they know the narrative of success. They know that narrative template. There was one day where I was spending time with a big group of students and we were talking about success, and they decided to get into small teams and each write a fictional story of the ultimate success story at the university, because we were interested in seeing how much they compare. And the stories all mimicked each other. One story, for example, reads, Jayla is a varsity track runner, chemistry whiz, and founder of a nonprofit organization that promotes health literacy in India. She is incredibly attractive, sunny, and well-spoken. She has many friends and a thriving social life. She is always on top of her schoolwork without ever looking like she tries too hard. She sleeps at 10 p.m. every weeknight to get up for 5:30 a.m. practice, but plays hard on the weekends. She is a perpetually energetic and enthusiastic person. As a freshman, she explored many fields in the sciences and humanities, eventually choosing a double major in biomedical engineering and creative writing. She is passionate about both fields and excited about her future career options, which are many. So the students know the story. They know the script of the total winner and how it should look at the university. Now, given that within this narrative of the total winner, given that the bar is set so incredibly high, and as we heard in that story, it reaches across academic, professional, extracurricular, social, and emotional domains. It's really just a matter of time before a student begins to notice the ways that they deviate from this mythical norm of the total winner. They compare themselves to their peers in real life and on the highlight reel of Facebook. And through social comparison, they begin to notice a gap between who I am and who I should be. And it is this gap that causes stress for students. So now we're going to get into some of the core types of stress that the students described and would share with me in this study. And they even have sort of a local vocabulary for this stress. They had names for the different types that I'll share with you now. So social comparison, the students discussed as a big part of their lives. Now, once this gap opens up, noticing this is who I am, the reality of who I am in this moment, and this is who I should be, according to the total winner story. Once that gap opens up, the students respond immediately by repairing the performance of the total winner. And the students call this duck syndrome, projecting an image of calm and competence above the waterline while paddling frantically underneath. So in other words, the stress that's caused by this gap in recognizing a gap in the performance, that the seams are showing, the students try to manage their distress by using a strategy from within the culture of success, projecting a better self-image. And so that's what duck syndrome referred to. So students might isolate themselves and overwork, subordinating their need for relationships in order to seem prepared and more productive. They might ignore physical, emotional limitations in order to keep working. They might work really hard to hide their stress. But what exactly is getting hidden and shoved beneath the water? Over the course of my research, I tracked all the situations and events that students described as potential signs of failure, things they wanted to hide. And the sheer range and volume of these events was pretty shocking. Making a mistake, receiving a negative evaluation, not being chosen to be a member of a group, reaching the limits to one's capacity, feeling uncertain about the future, not having a passion or not knowing what your passion is, choosing a major in the humanities, even, and this one broke my heart, even expressing grief over the loss of a loved one, or feeling like it was taking you too long to go through the grieving process. These, even taking time off school to de-stress. So these and countless other events were described by the students as potentially shameful moments of failure. And these events were some of the things that the students would try to hide with duck syndrome. And so this is what happens when the bar is set incredibly high, as it is in American success culture. What would typically be considered a perfectly typical, ordinary college experience, like getting a B or laying on the grass, relaxing without advancing one's life plan, these moments can become potential sources of guilt or even shame for the students. Now, the university had many programs and courses designed to help the students with their stress. Programs about happiness, resilience, growth mindset, empathy, compassion, self-compassion, passion, having a passion, and I was told even failure. Now, what's interesting about a lot of these programs, as I mentioned before, is that many of them were received by students as yet another desirable trait that one could fail to achieve. And another thing that I noticed about the programs was that, given that they were constructed within the culture of success, they seemed to use some of the same core assumptions that the students were struggling with. So for example, and we hear these stories in Silicon Valley all the time, entrepreneurs talking about the importance of failure, and often there will be a story that's told supposedly about failure, but the story sort of goes, you know, I failed 17 times before I eventually launched my company that got me rich. And in the same way, at the university, the stories that were supposedly about failure somehow all seemed to end in success. For example, one was a person sharing a story about how they got a B and how that was devastating to him. You know, I got a B, it was it really shook me up, and it led to this series of events that I never could have predicted, which landed me this prestigious job that I now hold. So the stories all kind of loop back to success. We can't seem to escape it. And so stories like that don't let the student off the hook. It sort of loops them back in to the culture and this performance. So over time, with all of this hiding, all of the hiding involved with duck syndrome, a student may come to experience what they called imposter syndrome. The recognition that I might be exposed as a fraud, that someone else is going to discover I really am a failure, and I might be exposed as a fraud at the institution. So one student, for example, shared with me, freshman year was the hardest. I felt exponentially out of place. I didn't feel a sense of belonging, and so I assumed I must have just slipped through the admissions cracks, and I began to feel an incredible sense of failure whenever life didn't go as planned. So with duck syndrome, we saw that many ordinary moments could be potentially taken as moments of failure. Here we see with imposter syndrome that in those moments, one can question their worth or question their rights to belong. And yet again, with this pattern, we sometimes see students using some of the same, using coping strategies from within the culture of success. So the same student that was describing to me the sense of not belonging freshman year goes on to say, you know, I tried to put myself out there and join different communities. I tried the Greek system, had a terrible time. I interviewed for university clubs that only admitted the elitist of the social elite and got denied. So again, we see this student falling back on some of the same strategies that seem to cause the stress in the first place. In this case, seeking a sense of belonging and personal worth by seeking membership in exclusive groups, almost like a repetition of the admissions process. So we've seen how social comparison can sort of trigger this sense in students, I am not who I should be, and they work really hard to manage that stress through duck syndrome, through hiding things. They might feel a sense that they don't belong. We're going deeper now, getting closer to what I believe is the root of the issue. Students say that when this tension progresses to more active self-questioning, students describe the inner critic, the harsh voices of self-criticism that they can heap on themselves if they fail to deliver an extraordinary performance. So if imposter syndrome says, I feel like a failure, so I must not belong, inner critic says, I feel like a failure, and so I must be bad, or I must be worthless. This is sort of that thought pattern. So one student said, as ambitious and hardworking students, we are so quick to give in to the negative voice in our head that always wants more, a voice that puts pressure on us, a voice that puts pressure on us to pretend that everything is perfect all the time, no matter what is really going on in our body and our mind. If we are stressed, it says, suck it up, get through the week. If we are lonely, that voice asks, on a campus with so many students, how could you feel that way? Another student put it more bluntly by saying, students here don't experience a dog-eat-dog environment. They experience dog-eat-self. So when a student drops into this form of self-criticism, they may be experiencing a particularly painful form of shame, of feeling like I don't belong in this community where I know one is expected to be the total winner. And they may view themselves in these moments as the very thing they have been taught to avoid, a failure. And I think it's important to note that the student voices that I'm sharing with you tonight, they weren't actually failing, any of them. They were having the experience of failing, which could bottom out in that form of self-criticism. So this is a potential cost of embracing the culture of success wholeheartedly. And that is that a person can internalize the culture and identify with its hero figure, the total winner. If they do, they may expect of themselves an extraordinary performance. And when this performance falls short, their identity may crumble. They may experience life as a threat to their identity. And if that happens, students may view themselves through the eyes of society that they have internalized on the path to success. They may view themselves as failures with some level of criticism, rejection, or in its extreme form, contempt. And so this is what I feel is really important to name and develop connections around discussing. And that is that all of these different forms of student stress, social comparison, duck syndrome, imposter syndrome, and the inner critic, they all seem to center around this core issue, the fear of feeling shame, criticism, or some form of social exclusion if one is seen as a failure. Now, I've put failure in quotes here because when the bar is set so incredibly high, this could mean the fear of feeling shame for being ordinary, for being an ordinary human being. So this is what I believe a great deal of the stress and the anxiety is about. It's not feeling that really uncomfortable sensation, shame, which signals to our bodies as human beings that we have done something wrong, that we have behaved inappropriately, or we have done something that is outside of the norms of our culture. And if one's culture is the culture of success, where there are expectations around being extraordinary, that means that a student can experience the pain of dehumanizing oneself, shaming oneself for these ordinary, typical human experiences. Actually, experiences that bring us together, our weaknesses, our limitations. So this is the shadow side of the culture of success. We are now standing in its darkness, and it is here together where we must turn toward the light. And the antidote in this case is affirming our shared humanity. That, I believe, will be necessary for the transformation that's asking to occur. Because it is love, the recognition of our shared humanity, that's really asking to move through us, through our minds and our bodies and our systems. Our love for ourselves and each other must come forth and overpower these voices of illusion that shout their terrible advice. I believe to emerge from this pattern, for the successful student who is feeling stress, I believe to emerge from that form of stress once and for all, he may need to enter the place he fears the most, his humanity. In being an ordinary human being, he can find either heaven or hell, depending on which way he turns, towards love or fear, truth or fiction. The reality of one's ordinary human experience, or the story of the total winner. And rather than reject his humanity so he can preserve the ideal, as we saw with duck syndrome, he must reject the ideal so he can preserve his humanity. In this new place, his humanity, he may still experience the everyday stress of a human life. But here they won't threaten to destroy him, but instead offer doorways of connection to his whole self and thus to other human beings. In the affirmation of our shared humanity, here the aches and pains of being human only serve to bring us together. Here, love is possible, compassion is possible, the freedom to actually make a choice for yourself is possible. And none of those experiences are truly available to the one that remains in the tight, limited, rigid performance of the total winner. And so, ironically, it is the student's ordinary human experience, which he has been taught to fear, which is actually his doorway to freedom, going in to see what's in there. His doorway to freedom is hidden within the fear itself. And so we have some more precise language now for supporting students. We saw that the distress arose in the recognition of that gap, recognizing a gap between who I am and who I believe I should be according to the story of the total winner. And the gap caused distress to students because the students believed they needed to be that ideal in every moment. And so to help these students, I believe that we need to flip the script and the adults need to lead the way. Rather than rejecting our humanity to preserve the ideal, we can reject the ideal and affirm the humanity of ourselves and our children. In other words, the answer is not more self-improvement. The answer is simply recognizing our shared humanity. It's a subtraction, not an addition, which I know is a very un-American solution. You don't have to become better. You don't have to buy anything. The good news is you can't help but be human. And rejecting the ideal may sound like a terrifying prospect. But if you open to that possibility and allow it to begin to unravel in your life, it will no longer, that ideal, that mythical norm will no longer be able to torment you or your child. And I recognize that this process and these conversations can be difficult for parents too. I've been sharing my work with parents and their children to help them make sense of how it connects with their lives and develop empathy for each other. And I recently got to witness a particularly powerful moment between a mother and her daughter. And the teenage daughter was explaining to her mother, she was saying, "Mom, you have to understand my experience. I really want to do well in school. But I feel criticized every step of the way." And the mother responded by saying, well, you have to understand that as a parent, I just want to do everything I can to make sure that you have a good life. I would feel awful if you failed, if you didn't have a good life. And I wanted to get the mother to elaborate a little bit on that awful feeling she might have. And so, not that I actually wanted this outcome for her daughter, but I said to the mother, okay, let's imagine your daughter doesn't get into any colleges. What would you be feeling in that moment? What would you be thinking? Tell us about it. And she said, I would feel like a failure as a mother. And in that moment, the mother and the daughter looked at each other and something clicked, because they could both recognize that they were both struggling with the same core fear, the fear of being a failure in their respective roles as a student and as the parent of a student. So the culture of success is really affecting us all. So going back to mysteries, why are students struggling immensely despite doing everything right? I believe it's because they're afraid of seeming like a failure, that within a culture that generally views failure as shameful. And why are our attempts seeming to only go part way? I think it's because we as adults don't want to feel that either. We've all been very deeply conditioned to fear failure, because that feeling of shame is a really uncomfortable sensation. And from one point of view, that can seem terrifying, but it's also what makes the conversation beautiful, because it's the thread that connects us all. That golden thread that connects us all is hidden within our fears of failure. So the students at the university would pass notes to each other like this and do what they could to counter the culture of success. They were also eager to have conversations about the culture of success and understand how it has affected their lives and their personal values. So, for example, after conducting the research, I went back to teach some classes based on that research, basically to create spaces where students might be able to gather and talk about some of these themes. And so some of the activities is students would go out on campus and collect flyers or snap photos of things and basically analyze the culture of success and how it manifests on campus. And then they would come back together with these artifacts. We would discuss them and pick them apart and ask each other questions about what value we feel like it represents. And basically, they would be developing a level of consciousness around the messaging they're receiving from society. In another class, which was a writing class, the students were learning how to do research and how to write research-based arguments. And I made the theme of that class the culture of success, so that students could be researching it and writing about it and digging deeper into the themes that connect with their lives. So, for example, one student was really curious about her experience as an Asian American student, and so she decided to study the model minority stereotype and how that ties in with the culture of success. Another class was a mindfulness class where we would be observing our thoughts and our feelings and noticing how our thought patterns could sort of do the chatter of success culture. So all of this is really around supporting students in being able to notice and name the aspects of the culture in their environment and observe their own thought patterns, feeling patterns, behavioral patterns that have really been conditioned within this space. And I want to be really clear in all of this that I'm focusing on the individual voices of students who were experiencing this stress, but I'm not at all blaming the students or the parents or the teachers, not the individual elements within the system. Unfortunately, the students at times seem to blame themselves. They labeled these patterns of stress as syndromes, duck syndrome, imposter syndrome. But I want to be really clear that it's the culture that's pathological, not the students. The culture of success triggers stress while simultaneously demanding a stress-free image. It's a culture that breeds fear and then turns around and says, fear is shameful. And I think this is where students can get trapped because they don't understand where their stress is coming from, or they think that the fact that they're feeling stress in their body means that there might be something wrong with them, or they just can't take it, they're not tough enough, which is absolutely not true. So if we really want to support the students, I think we would need to join together and take our attention off of individual students as the source of the problem and locate the problem in the broader system itself, in the culture of success in America today. And hidden within this culture is the belief that one person could be better than another person and therefore more worthy of membership and resources and support. And in the American educational system, we support this idea by separating students and ranking students, selectively rewarding and punishing our young based on their ability to project the popular persona of our time, the total winner. And so as we come together with a shared understanding around perhaps the appropriate place to focus, the broader culture of success, and how it can make being a human being so difficult at times, I'd like to close with an excerpt from another poem by David Whyte. In it, he describes a monastery filled with faces carved out of wood, statues up on the wall. And he describes the experience of entering the monastery. And above the temple door is this fierce gargoyle-like figure. He says, "We see the terrible figure, fierce eyes demanding, will you step through?" Once inside the monastery, he sees the other faces carved out of wood. And this is what he writes. "Such love in solid wood, carved in devotion, their eyes have softened through age and their mouths curve through delight of the carver's hand. If only our own faces would allow the invisible carver's hand to bring the deep grain of love to the surface. If only we knew, as the carver knew, how the flaws in the wood led his searching chisel to the core. We would smile too, and not need faces immobilized by fear and the weight of things undone. When we fight with our failing, we ignore the entrance to the shrine itself and wrestle with the guardian, fierce figure on the side of good. And as we fight, our eyes are hooded with grief and our mouths dry with pain. If only we could give ourselves to the blows of the carver's hand, the lines in our faces would be the trace lines of rivers, feeding the sea, where voices meet, praising the features of the mountain and the cloud and the sky. Our faces would fall away until we, growing younger toward death, every day would gather our flaws in celebration to merge with them perfectly, impossibly, wedded to our essence, full of silence from the carver's hands. When we fight with our failing, we ignore the entrance to the shrine itself. Our fear of failure is like that gargoyle that guards the entrance to the temple of our shared humanity. Don't let it scare you away. We must be willing to cross that threshold together. It might not be pretty. It might not always feel good, but it's just what we need to do together. Once we're on the other side, once we're inside the temple, affirming our humanity together, we will look back with laughter that we battled so fiercely with the guardian at the gates. Thank you.